College transition for students with disabilities. How students with disabilities get accommodations at college. Elizabeth Cohen Hamblet, Learning Disabilities Consultant, ldadvisory.com.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hamblet. I write about and make presentations on preparing students with disabilities for successful college transition. You may be aware that every college has to provide at least some basic accommodations to students that they find eligible for them. I'm going to show you how students find the information and register.
Students should be able to find the information they need to register with the Disability Services Office with a simple internet search. So I'll start by typing in the name of the school here. And I'm going to add the word or the phrase disability services. Now, as you can see, it's gone to a link for a place called Student Accessibility Services. Not every office uses the word disability in their name. So it seems like they have brought me to the right place. And as I look, I see I am in the right place. They provide the services for students with disabilities at Delaware State University. Now, what's really helpful about this site is they've made it extremely easy for new students to find the process to register. If you're looking at a site and you don't see something quite this obvious, try going under something that says new students, or sometimes there'll be a link for students and one for faculty and staff. So try going under students and see if that takes you there. If you click around and you can't find the information you need to start the process to register, just contact the office. But in this case, they've made it nice and easy, so I'm going to click. So they provide all of the steps in the process, which is nice and clear. The student's going to submit a request for accommodations form, and they're going to submit documentation. If you click here, you can go on the documentation requirements. For the purposes of this video, which is just about the process and how it goes, I'm not going to click here. You can see my other videos on documentation and other related topics on my YouTube channel. So students are encouraged to start this process before the start of classes. I wholeheartedly agree. It's my recommendation that as soon as students are accepted to and enroll at a school and they get their student ID number, that they start this process. They should be aware that it can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks for this process from start to finish. So once they submit that paperwork and their form, the director will review the documentation and recommendations, and then the student will have a meeting. It says here with the director, but then it says the SAS representative will talk to the students. So I'm not clear whether that is the same person or maybe a different staffer. Will talk to the student about the impact of their disability or any barriers that they experience from it, and will determine what accommodations will be in place. Now, what's interesting about this, and I don't see this at a lot of schools, is if the accommodations are approved at that meeting, the student will get the letter for accommodations right at that meeting. I am more familiar with a process where the decision would be made actually after the meeting, not during the meeting, and then there would be an email or another way of students getting the letter. Now, at this college, the student is going to give a copy of the letter to anybody involved in facilitating their accommodations, which means anybody who needs to know about it in order for their accommodations to happen. So here they've given an example of a professor, but if students use a lab or a dark room or something like that, and there is an accommodation they need in those places, then whoever works there that would be involved would need to have a copy of the letter to show that they were approved for these accommodations. So steps 1 through 3 and 4 are all something that students would do at the start. Now, this is fairly typical at a lot of colleges, after that first semester where they get their accommodations, students still have to renew their accommodations every semester. So those letters essentially expire at the end of the term. And in order to get new letters, renew their accommodation letters, there's another form that students can fill out online. And again, in the interest of what this video is to do, we're not going to click on that. So the process may vary. There may be colleges where students don't have to renew it every term, but that's a question that they can ask in that intake meeting that they have with the office. Now let's see what they're going to request from students for the first time that they're registering. So this form asks for some basics like contact information, date of birth. I guess the D number must be their student ID number, things like that. Now, this is where the vocabulary of college might be new to some students. Typically, a prospective student is a student who is looking at the college, but maybe hasn't applied yet, or has applied but hasn't gotten in yet. An undergraduate student is a student who has gotten into the college and has registered, has enrolled at that college. And then a graduate student is a student who has finished a four-year college degree and has gone back to school for a master's degree or a PhD. So if this is a student who has graduated from high school and is just starting college, that student will be the undergraduate student. Next, they're going to indicate what class they're in. Again, a student who is just out of high school and starting is going to be a freshman. If a student has already done a year of college, that student is a sophomore, and on like that. Now, if students are transfer students, they'll need to know what they're entering as. Sometimes the college will give them a year's credit, in which case they might be starting that school as a sophomore. Now, I've noticed that under major or program of study, there is a red star there, which typically indicates that students can't complete this form and submit it without making a choice. I can't speak for this school because I don't know what their process is, but my guess would be, since they don't have an option here where students can say, undecided, I'm not sure, that they are not asking students to commit to a major by way of this form. They may just be interested in knowing what field they're interested in studying in, because sometimes there are implications for the accommodation. So for instance, if a student wanted to study international business and was also requesting a foreign language substitution, the department would have to talk to the foreign language department, it would talk to the international business department and ask whether a substitution for foreign language would be considered a fundamental alteration to their program requirements. So that may be why they ask. If students are concerned about being locked into a choice of major, which again, I don't think that they are going to be doing by way of this form, they should contact the Disability Services Office and ask about this. But they would make their choice here. Then they would indicate which campus they were going to attend or if they're online. Next, they're going to ask what category of disability students have. And so notice that if students don't feel that theirs fits under any of these categories, there's an other, and they can fill in that blank with whatever they think is appropriate. Now, as far as the condition being temporary or permanent, we know for many disabilities, it is a permanent thing. We don't expect students to grow out of their learning disabilities or their ADHD or their autism spectrum disorders. This is probably for students who, for instance, break their right arm and write with their right arm. And so obviously they won't be able to write for some time, and they may get accommodated through this office, and the office just wants to know, is this a temporary situation? And if so, how long until you get use of your arm back? And then next they're asking, what are the functional impairments or the limitations that students experience as a result of their disability? And again, notice that there's an other. So if students don't feel that their needs are well represented here, they can click here and fill it in with whatever information they think the school needs. For many students who are starting off, this is going to be the first time they're requesting accommodations. And then they are asking students to actually to write out what accommodations they are seeking. Now, I believe that students should ask for whatever they want. As this school indicates at the top of this form and other places, they provide reasonable accommodations. And so sometimes accommodations that students have received in high school might not be seen as reasonable by college, but students won't know unless they ask. I think it's important during their high school years for the people working with them, the professionals, and also parents to become familiar with the kinds of accommodations that are commonly granted and those that are considered unreasonable at the college level, so that students will be prepared for what might happen and know what the chances are of the requests that they're making being approved. But they fill this out, and then they upload their files, and that would be the documentation that the school has asked for after they've checked the requirements by clicking on that link. If they have any trouble uploading their files, they should contact the office, and I'm sure that they will be happy to help them. But this is the form to request accommodations, and then they submit the documentation. I hope you found this video helpful. If the process doesn't look the way it did on this particular website and you've clicked around and you can't find the way to register, just contact the Disability Services Office at the college.